Shalom. Here we are with the final lesson in the book of Lamentations. We will be dealing this time with chapter 4 and chapter 5, the final two chapters of the book. In chapter 1, we spoke about the relationship between Bat Zion, the daughter of Zion, and God. And we spoke about the anger at the nations who had betrayed the people of Israel. And Bat Zion, the daughter of Zion, returned to God and said, we were mistakenly betrayed because we trusted the nations. In chapter 2, the very relationship between God and Bat Zion was examined, where we saw that at first God himself was blamed, for he himself had done all these terrible things, destroying, not using any mercy. And if in chapter 1 we spoke about the process of the understanding of loss and faith in the other nations, in chapter 2, what was at stake was the actual relationship between Bat Zion and God. In chapter 3, we spoke about Jeremiah's personal diary. Jeremiah describing his loneliness when he was thrown in the pit, when the people didn't believe him, his loneliness when he was betrayed by his own people. And we wondered why this chapter was part of the book of Lamentations. And we understood that Jeremiah, the characteristics of his entire prophecy was the fact that he identified himself with total identification between himself and Bat Zion and the people of Israel and the daughter of Zion. From here we come to chapter 4. Chapter 4, just like chapter 1 and 2, begins with that word Eicha. What does the word Eicha mean? In Hebrew, the word Eich means how. But the word Eicha is something much more strong. Much stronger. Eicha! How can it be? We are comparing two things that are so opposite to each other. How could it be that a city that was filled with people becomes lonely? Eicha. How could it be that you, God yourself, destroyed your own temple? Eicha. And here we are in chapter 4. We're not talking about any relationship between anybody. We're talking about the very actual destruction itself. The process of the destruction of Jerusalem. And this, therefore, chapter 4 is the only chapter which is chronologically in order. It begins with the sorrow, the hunger, the suffering and the siege in the walls of Jerusalem. The very first chapter, which is the first verse, which is a title, talks about what is happening to the people. Eicha yu am zahav, yishne haketem hatov. The finest of gold is tarnished, is dimmed. Tishtapechna avnei kodesh, sacred stones, holy stones, which you usually find closed up only inside the temple, are scattered in every single corner. Bnei Tzion hayekarim, hamesulaim bapaz, the precious children of Zion, which are prized like fine gold. Eicha, once again, nechshevu lenivlei cheres. They're referred to as paper plates. They're referred to as clay. In their time of the Tanakh, clay was their paper plates. Meaning, what is this precious china is now being used as if it was a plastic cup crunched and thrown into the garbage can. גם תנים חלצו שד, הניקו גוריהן, בתמיל האכזר, כי יעינים במדבר. Usually, the beasts that are so wicked, even they know how to feed their own babies, their own kids. But the suffering of the children of Zion, in the hunger, in the walls, in the siege, their mothers can't even feed them. The hunger is so terrible. Ha'ochlim lema'adanim, people who are used to eating very fine food, nashamu bachutzot, are begging in the streets. Ha'emunim alei tola chibku ashpatot, those who are used to wearing fancy clothes are now searching the garbage cans to find something to wear. And the description here is not a description, not of the betraying of the nations, not of an anger to God, but the very suffering of the destruction. And the question is, Eicha, how could such a thing be? How could we suffer such a situation? Until it reaches the point where they're talking about the destruction of the temple itself. We're talking about the fire. We're talking about Tzadu tze'adeinu belechet berchovotenu karav kitzenu. Our end is very, very close. We're walking in the streets and we feel ba kitzenu. Reading chapter 18. Our end is very, very close. Aleharim de lakunu bamidbar, it says in verse 19. They're chasing us. Even when it's almost all over. When it's almost all over. When now we've rim bachutzot negualu badam, where people that are blind are taken chained and they're walking in the streets. You can't even touch their clothing. Everything is impure. Everything is in a status of impurity because the city of God has been destructed. And the lamenter concludes with 2 verses in this chapter, but then he also concludes with the entire chapter 5. And the last 2 verses in chapter 4, the lamenter is talking in second person to Bat Zion, to the daughter of Zion, and to Bat Edom. Sisi v'simchi Bat Edom. Bat Edom, you can now sit around and be happy as if everything's happening. Gam alayich ta'avor kos tishkiri v'tit'ari. The cup will pass to you too. Don't sit around and think that what's happening to the people of Israel is only going to happen to the people of Israel. The cup will pass you too. Gam alayich ta'avor kos tishkiri v'tit'ari. You will vomit. Tam avonech bat Zion, but to the daughter of Zion, your sin, your punishment is come to an end. Tam avonech bat Zion, lo yosif lehaglotech, pakad avonech bat Edom, gila al chatotaych. Your iniquity is atoned for daughter Zion, he will never again exile you. Coming to an end, coming to a point where everything is the worst it can be, is also a process of coming to the worst of worst, where from there things can only improve. And we know that the process of people of Israel in the exile was a very long process. Several decades, several centuries, thousands of years. But here we are, as the prophet prophesies. The people of Israel coming back home to their homeland. And this is the whole concept of chapter 5. Zechor Adonai mehayalanu. Always remember what has happened to us. Habita ur'et cherpatenu. Look, always have us in front of your eyes. And see what is happening. See what's happening to our land. Nachalatenu ne'efcha lezarim in verse 2 of chapter 5. Batenu le'nachrim. Your land has been taken over by the other nations. And Zion is calling out, Hashivenu Adonai elecha v'nashuva. Why? Please bring us back and we will return. Because nafla ateret rashenu, our crown has fell down. And we are so sad at this situation. Al har Tzion sheshamem the deserted Mount of Zion. Please, God, Hashivenu Adonai Elecha v'nashuva. Return us, and we will return. Chadesh yameinu kekedem. Renew our days as they were. You brought us back home to the land, God. We are praying to you. Please, help us once again rebuild your temple. Help us once again return to the days of the past, where your glory was so present in the city of Jerusalem and among your nation. Bat Zion and Har Zion, the Mount of Zion and the daughter of Zion, unite in a one united Jerusalem. And from there, from the Mount of Zion, from the Temple Mount, all the nations united will call out in your name. You are one, and your name is one. Amen. Shalom. We are in our third lecture on the book of Lamentations, Eicha. We spoke about in the first two lessons the message of chapters 1 and 2